Welcome to the next in our series of online lectures for Western Civ 1. Today we are going to continue our discussion of Rome by demonstrating how Rome goes from being a tiny little republic in the center of Italy to being one of the dominant forces in all of the Mediterranean world. As always, there are some important questions and ideas that you should keep track of as you are watching this lecture. Anyway, let's get to it. Before we get into some new things, however, let's recap some of the things we talked about earlier in class. First of all, we noted that Rome during its early days was a republic, and a republic is simply a government without a king. Another thing that distinguished the Roman Republic from other governments of its day was the notion of separation of powers. Power in Rome was simply divided between several groups and among several classes. For example, there were two councils who served as the executive. There was a senate in which the rich landowners were represented. There was the council of the plebs, which represented the common people in Roman society. The benefit of all of this was that no one group could dominate Roman society. No one individual could become so powerful that he could become a tyrant and dominate the others.
After declaring itself to be a republic in 509 BCE, Rome began to expand throughout central Italy. In fact, by 264 BCE, it dominated all of the Italian peninsula. But expansion soon caused problems for Rome. How do you incorporate many peoples and many cultures, some of whom were bitter enemies, into your society? The answer was the Roman Confederation. The Roman Confederation, which was a lot like the Latin Rite discussed in an earlier lecture, offered citizenship in the Roman Republic to all conquered peoples in Italy. All these people had to do was to pay taxes in the Roman government and contribute troops to its army. It was a brilliant innovation. With the Roman Confederation, Rome soon turned its enemies into allies.
They were going to need it. Rome continued to expand throughout the Mediterranean, and this brought it into conflict with a number of other powerful nations, kingdoms, and empires. Chief amongst these was Carthage. After 3 very bloody wars, Rome finally defeated Carthage in the year 146 BCE. By 133 BCE, Rome had also defeated the Hellenistic kingdoms of Macedonia, which is where Alexander the Great had grown up, and Pergamum, which is today's Turkey. Success will leave the Roman people feeling very, very powerful, but it will also leave many of them feeling unsettled. Why? Well, conquest will change Rome. Conquest will bring Rome into contact with a number of new peoples and new cultures. Some elements, I should say, of those cultures will be adapted by the Romans or put to their own use. Let's look a little bit at those cultures. Conquest of so many foreign territories brought Rome into contact with a number of strange peoples and strange beliefs. The most influential of these foreign cultures was Hellenistic culture. After its conquest of Macedonia and Pergamum and other Hellenistic territories, Rome will be flooded with the ideas, philosophies, and religions of the Hellenistic world. Roman religion will find itself in competition with mystery religions that had become powerful in the Hellenistic kingdoms. Some of these religions will include Judaism, the religion of the Hebrews, the cult of Isis that we've talked about from Egypt, and Zoroastrianism, which we have also discussed in class thus far. Conquest of the Hellenistic kingdoms will also have an impact on Roman art and literature. Greek poetry and dramas will be translated into Latin, which is the language of Rome. In other words, Romans will begin reading books and plays, etc., written by not Roman authors, but by Hellenistic authors from all around the Mediterranean world. Also unsettling to many Romans is the growing influence of the Greek language in Rome. As the Hellenistic kingdoms contributed their culture to Roman culture, the Greek language, along with Latin, will become the official language of the Roman Empire. Greek customs will also start to work their way into Roman society. One of those customs, the construction of bathhouses, which were very, very popular in Greece, will also become all the rage in Rome as well. All of this is going to lead some Romans to fear that Rome has lost touch with its roots. The growing influence of Hellenistic religion, art and literature, language and customs is going to lead many to fear that Rome is no longer Roman, but it's becoming something else. Now, I'd like you to think for just a second if this sounds familiar to you. It does to me, because really this fear that is sweeping through Rome at this point in time is really rather similar to some of the fears in our own country today. Many in the United States are afraid that immigration is having a negative effect on American culture by influencing foreign cultures into our own. That's really not that different from what many Romans were thinking back then. Here's one example of that growing Latino influence on our own culture here in the United States. A second problem that conquest will create for Rome deals with economics, or maybe I should say it deals with the social class system. War, and actually victory in war, is going to lead the poor in Rome to get poorer. We need to understand a little bit about the role small farmers played in the Roman army to understand this. During Rome's many, many wars, poor farmers were often drafted into the army, and thus would be away for decades fighting the battles for Rome's survival. In some cases, foreign armies often invaded Roman territory and ravaged much of Roman agriculture. Many farmers would return home after 7, 8, 9, 10 years in the service to discover that they had lost everything. Rich Romans bought up much of the land from the poor at very, very low prices. This created huge estates called latifundia. Now, the rich who owned these latifundia, these giant estates, also bought slaves to work the fields rather than hiring free laborers. This further depressed the economy, as free laborers now have a hard time supporting themselves and finding jobs. Some in Rome will see a danger to the growing unrest among the Republic's poor. One of those men was a senator, a rich man named Tiberius Gracchus. Tiberius Gracchus spoke in favor of the poor, saying, quote, "The wild beasts that roam over Italy have every one of them a cave or a lair to lurk in. But the men who fight and die for Italy enjoy the common air and light. Indeed, but nothing else. Houseless and homeless, they wander about with their wives and children." Essentially, what Tiberius Gracchus is saying here is that the poor are those who fought for Rome. These are the ones who served in the military. They fought and died for Rome, and yet now those who survived the wars are returning home to discover that they have lost everything. To try and remedy this situation, Tiberius Gracchus will push for a law in 133 BCE calling for a distribution of public lands. In other words, lands held not by individuals but by the Roman Republic itself should be broken up into small farms and given to the poor, landless population. Tiberius's suggestions will ultimately anger the rich men in the Senate. A group of these rich senators will ultimately ambush him one day and murder him. This does not stop the call for reform, however. In fact, Gaius Gracchus, the brother of Tiberius Gracchus, will take up his brother's calls for reform. He also will push for cheap grain to help feed the poor. His proposals will also anger the men of the Senate, who will also assassinate him. The calls for reform will not stop with the deaths of the Gracchus brothers, however. Gaius Marius, a hero of the wars against Carthage, will also push for greater justice for the men who served in his army. Gaius Marius will in fact promise his soldiers land in exchange for their loyalty. The Senate, when it hears of this proposal, will refuse to approve it. Essentially, what you have going on here is then you have a growing division between the Roman government, represented here by the Senate, and the army, represented by Gaius Marius. The soldiers in the army see that it's only their commanders, it's their military leaders, who have their best interests at heart. The government doesn't seem to care about them at all. You essentially have a growing division between the Roman government and its army, and this is a very, very dangerous development. Again, this may sound familiar to you. A few years ago, the Occupy Wall Street movement took over the streets of some of America's largest cities. A lot of this was all about trying to undo the growing disparity in wealth between America's richest 1% and the rest of the 99% of American society. In conclusion, by the time we get up to Gaius Marius, you should have the idea that the Roman Republic is on the verge of civil war. First of all, you have the division between rich and poor within Roman society. You also have a division between the army and the government. These divisions will in fact threaten the very existence of the Roman Republic, and ultimately, for our purpose, will decide the direction of Western civilization for the next several hundred years to come.